Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
Look at all the people around you. They may seem very different, but they all have something very much in common. Work. Most people have had a history of roles that's taken them to their current job.
Everybody has a story about their job and how they got there. We'll explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced at their jobs. So enjoy the conversations as people share things about their jobs that were not in the job description.
Okay, on today's episode, it is definitely not safe for work. We're going to talk about sex at work. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey, how's it going? I'm glad to be back.
It's going well. I'm glad to see you got paroled and are finally able to make it out of your house.
The ankle bracelet's a little uncomfortable, but we'll make it work.
But it looks nice.
Sure.
It looks nice. It matches the thing around your neck. So anyway, so today we're going to talk about sex at work. And there's a part of me that says, I grew up as a younger person working and then as a manager, and sex is a normal part of life. But when you mix it with work, it is a little weird.
Yeah, for sure.
And especially from the view of managing people, it's very weird because you kind of get to know people, and then you see a side of them that you don't necessarily want to see. There should be, in my opinion, only so much you need to know about somebody's personal habits.
Right.
So one of the things that I think is interesting, speaking of manager roles, there are people that do things as managers that I can't fathom. We talked about back in the day when we worked at a steakhouse, how, we were 16-year-old kids, and there was managers, like, as soon as most of the people would leave, they'd be like, hey, let's get some beer. And they would open up like wine coolers and beer. And for the last 2 hours we worked, we're 16 years old, and that manager's supplying us with alcohol.
Right. And to us at the time at 16, in our mind's eye, these guys are 40 years old, but in reality, they're just, in their mid-20s probably. So to them, they just thought, oh, yeah, we'll just party it up with these young kids, I think.
Right. Well, and we also thought they were the coolest people in the world.
Right.
Under a different lens, I'm thinking, what kind of an idiot would do that?
Right. Well, it was mid-'80s, I guess, right? Maybe.
That's
I don't know
true.
if that's an excuse or not. But
And let's face it, it's not like we couldn't get alcohol on our own, but in your entire professional career, have you, and maybe the answer is yes, maybe I'm just the guy who's not like this, have you ever considered giving underage people at your work alcohol?
No. Even when I worked, for the grocery store, it's a little different scenario, right? We're not just going to open beers right there in the aisle. I think it was just a perfect storm when we were at the restaurant because he could close the doors,
Right.
Had a captive audience.
Yeah.
And, maybe he had work to do in the office, but he wanted to drink a few beers and he didn't care that we were.
Yeah, he figured, the only way I can drink this beer is to pay these kids off.
Right.
Yeah. And then a lot of that happened. Very surprising because I just couldn't even fathom. The other thing, and I don't know that I ever witnessed this, or maybe I was the guy that worked so hard, my head was down and I was just doing my thing and never paid attention, but managers having sex with employees. Have you, I think there's always that, people think, oh, that guy's spending a lot of time with that girl and she's really young and pretty, so maybe something's going on.
Right.
Have you ever seen or heard of that in any of your workplaces where you were at least suspicious it was going on?
So nothing confirmed, but like you said, definitely there's been some suspicions, especially when I worked in retail, because again, you have younger kids and, boys and girls, 16, 17, 18. And then what do you do when you're that age, right? You kind of look up to the manager. They're an authority figure.
Right.
So it's real easy for this 25, 26-year-old man maybe to seduce these young girls. I'm not saying it's right, but it happens, right?
Yeah, of course.
So although I don't know, I can't pinpoint an exact time that it happened, but I'm sure, and I still talk to some friends from my old grocery store days, and we talk like, I'm pretty sure that manager was trying to, whether they went through with it or not or got that far, they were definitely trying.
Yeah, I can tell you for sure, as a manager of call centers, I've had many scenarios to the point where, I'll tell you one example, two examples actually that happened within a span of, 2.5 months. And they were my managers that were having sex with their employees. And after the second one, I'll be honest, because that's one thing that I do not play with, there's so many bad things that can happen. And I get it. If you're both in your 20s and you're both attracted to each other, there's certainly a way to go about it. You can talk to HR. You can say, look, we started hanging out, and we'd make sure that there was no direct report kind of, any dotted line or anything. We can work with that. But I had a guy working for me, and he happened to work with all the new hires, okay? And he was a single guy. And the way we found out is one person complained because they said that this guy, we'll just call him Brian, it's not his name, that Brian was supposed to help me, get this other job, and it didn't happen. And so they were talking amongst the other people in the training class. Come to find out that Brian was hooking up with 3 people in the same training class.
Oh, boy.
And as soon as that was brought to the attention of HR, they did a bang-up job,
Literally.
no pun intended, of getting all the details, and it was embarrassing. This dude was going from woman to woman to woman. And when I say woman, it would not have surprised me if one of these was under 20 years old. He was like 26. Mm-hmm. I don't think we hired people under 18, but that could be a real issue in other businesses.
Right.
But this guy was hooking up with all these women, and they were chatting each other like on instant message. And here's a pro tip for all you listeners. Your work collects and has access to all that shit, and there's nothing you can do about it. So if you don't want them finding out about it, don't put it in writing.
Right.
And these girls, once they found out, it was like a reality show. It was like, wait a minute, you're saying that he was with you? Well, he's been hanging with me. And then a third person jumped in, and I was unfortunate enough to get to see this string of instant messages, and it was heinous. But I had to pull him in and say, what I say his name was Brian?
Yes.
I just had to say, Brian, anything going on with anybody in the training class? And immediately he's going, oh, no, they're all doing pretty well. And I go, oh, let me rephrase. It's been brought to my attention there might be some inappropriate relationships. And of course he's like, well, I don't think anyone in there is dating. Okay, let me rephrase it again. And I said, have you been hanging out personally with any of these people? And he was like, no. And then I just said, all right, I'll tell you what. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I'm going to give you one time to tell me absolutely the truth, and I'll never ask again. But if I find out you're lying to me, it's not going to go well for you. And I learned to never rob a bank with Brian because that motherfucker folded like a futon immediately. And he was like, well, yeah, I was hanging out with this person, but then, we kind of broke it off. And I said, dude, broke it off. You're their manager.
Right.
You shouldn't have relationships.
Right.
And we ended up, I had to term his employment, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very awkward because he was a really good guy and a decent manager, but you can't have that. Right. And then, no shit, it was like weeks later, another guy that worked for me, let's call him Dave.
Okay.
Dave, married, 2 kids, same scenario. These guys are trying to throw around their supervisor weight by saying, I'm going to help you get a job.
Well,
and
let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah.
Did you only hire hot girls? Maybe that was your problem.
In hindsight, you may be onto something.
If you hire the marginal ones, maybe these guys wouldn't be catting around.
God damn it. I need to get you in charge of HR.
See? Right. Make a phone call.
So this guy was hanging out with this girl, and then they were hooking up. And he was supposed to help her with her resume and to talk to somebody about getting a job. And it blew up because she literally went to HR saying that he was supposed to help and he's not doing anything. And not only is it her manager and he should be helping her, but all the stuff she's done for him. And they were like, what do you mean? Like, they're thinking irresponsible. Like, he make you clean his car or something?
Yeah, right.
Oh, no. They were hooking up, and I had to ask him, and he just took his badge off and handed it to me. He didn't even have to answer me. But, that's the thing. I get it. Young people, especially, they're all horn dogs and they want to do stuff. But at work, it blows my mind. And as a manager, I just can't imagine how somebody thinks that's a good idea.
Well, now I'm sitting here, and for the listeners, today is my anniversary, 29 years. And
I lost that bet, by the way. Yeah.
Well, now I'm thinking back, and you're making me feel bad because I met my wife at work, and she was 16 and I was 18. So
Yeah, you were robbing the cradle.
maybe I was the problem back then. And now that we're talking about it, I
You're
wasn't a manager though, so I guess
that's the thing. Yeah. And I met my wife at work, but again, we were just two lowly associates at that grand company, JCPenney. Which, speaking of, when you talk about hooking up, I will tell you, I did not. I mean, I hooked up with chicks at JCPenney before I was married, but I'm talking about in the workplace. I did not do that. That would have scared the shit out of me. I know 5 people that are friends of mine right now, men and women. They would come on here right now and just go, "Oh yeah, stock room all the time."
Yeah.
Break room, absolutely. When no one was there, it was a Sunday. It was late.
Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to think back to our steakhouse days, and we knew a few characters there that would pretty much bang anything. But I don't know that it ever really happened in the restaurant.
I mean, where the hell would it happen?
Yeah,
you could get AIDS going in the employee's bathroom. There's no way any I wasn't looking for self-respecting women, but no way some woman's going to be like, yeah, I'll just step over this grease stain on the floor.
I don't know. That one booth, like in the little party room, was pretty big.
Yeah, but, with that medieval attire that they had going on at that steakhouse, I'm not so sure it set the mood.
I don't know. The books my wife reads right now. I think
maybe
that
nowadays,
would actually
right?
Be a turn on. I don't know.
You missed an opportunity. Or you're not telling us something, one of the two.
Right.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting that when people think, maybe I'm just not, all that, but when they think having sex at work was a great idea.
Right. And, we've been around long enough, know people in different industries. And I've heard stories over the years, people working at a hospital and they hear tale of a doctor and a nurse maybe under the stairwell getting it on and then get busted, so then obviously like some of your previous employers, they're immediately let go, but so it happens.
But here's what blows my mind too, and maybe I'm thinking too deep. I think the world has changed a lot since COVID. I read an article just last week, and weirdly enough, it was focused on California because I think it was written from one of the California newspapers, but they're saying young people today are having less sex than ever. And I was like, what the hell does this mean? And they literally had a decent sample size of people they questioned, something like 15,000 people under the age of 25. And like it was a double-digit drop, 23% drop in people having sex. And their whole thing is, I think they all just relate to people on social media. I think some people kind of got away from the hookup culture and they're like, I'm fine. I don't even know anybody. But it's just so weird that you probably have less sex at work because everyone's working in their goddamn living room.
Right. And if you're not physically with somebody, and I don't mean a sexual way, I just mean being in the same physical space with them, sometimes you just don't make that connection, right? You might form a great bond or friendship through social media or Zoom because you work with that person. But, the physical attraction's not there because you're not physically in the same space.
Exactly. I mean, you have to get to know them well enough. So like with your situation, you could pay the dowry to her parents to buy her.
Right. Yeah, it only took 5 goats.
Well, the other part of, you have to be in the workplace. Here's a prime example. OswegoCountyNews.com. Deputy fire chief fired for having sex on the job. Deputy fire chief in Oswego Fire Department was fired by the city after an investigation into missing union money found out that he had sex at the fire station while on duty. Chief Paul Conzone confirmed Friday that Joseph, I think his name is Smegliski, Jr., was served with disciplinary charges of termination after being found guilty of purposeful and deliberate violations of the department's code of conduct. Yeah, that code of conduct gets you every time. Mayor Billy Barlow said that Smegliski had ultimately been terminated because we found out, and he admitted that he had sex in the duty office on at least one occasion at the fire station during a time when he was on shift. And here's what's interesting about this, and I don't know what everyone's take is on unions, but sometimes I cheer them, sometimes I'm like, what in the hell is going on? This guy was a 12-year veteran of the department. He was promoted the year prior to be one of the department's 4 deputy chiefs responsible for supervising an entire shift, and the department has since promoted a captain to fill that guy's position. But the revelations about his conduct came to light during an unrelated investigation. The firefighters union keeps money from fundraising in a specific room at the fire department, and when the union approached the city regarding concerns about $500 or $700 of missing money, Barlow said he ordered the police department to investigate. So they were investigating this guy about stealing money.
Mm-hmm.
Find out that he's bumping nasties in the office. So
all around great guy.
Absolutely. So it said it became known that he had a friend who was visiting periodically while he was on shift. But this is what's interesting. They find out who the woman is. They question her, and he pretty much admits to it. And then the article goes on to say, but Smegliski had been accused of stealing money before. In 2014, while chief of the volunteer fire department in a different county, he was charged with a felony for misusing $22,000 in department money. The charge came after an audit by the state comptroller's office. He pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of petty larceny and received a probation and a fine. But that dude who in 2014 got busted for inappropriately spending money later was promoted to deputy chief. How does this happen? It would never happen at a public company without a union, right?
Right, that's right. Well, there was a story, it was making the social media rounds here probably, 6 months ago or so. There was that police officer, female police officer, and I don't remember what town it was.
Right.
But it turns out she was pretty much hooking up with every police officer.
Yeah.
In the squad there or whatever, including, I think, at the police station, or maybe they were, they're supposed to be out on patrol and they're out hooking up somewhere. So, I guess it goes both ways. It sounds like she was the one that was actively trying to, get some.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that because that was responsible for many memes on social media. And just the idea that happened, and I kind of pulled something up about it too. And her name was Megan Hall, and she was at the center of that whole scandal. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing because they said, and also this person, they name off all these police officers, and they said this town, it's about 30 minutes south of Nashville. It has a relatively small police department with only about 60 sworn officers. So the sex scandal effectively cut its entire staff by 12%. So this woman gets to say she hooked up with 12% of the entire police department. Right. I mean, I'd put that on a resume.
Hey, well, yeah, why not? Shows initiative.
Right. I mean, at least she can say, can you beat that?
Right.
Huh? I mean, you have to go to a small town to even give it a try.
Challenge accepted.
It's funny. Again, I was way too much of a wuss to try this, but there are stories out there of people like with their girlfriends or their wives or something hooking up. And from swoopwhoop.com, I know you have a membership there, and I may have messed up the pronunciation, but I want to give them their props. Somebody said they were a married couple, but both employees, they got caught screwing at the Christmas party. Nothing happened for a few weeks. Then they both got fired because they were collecting the gym membership stipend but couldn't show proof of attendance. Pretty sure that was the first and only time the company enforced that stipend rule.
Right.
Yeah, play stupid games,
right.
Win stupid prizes.
Right.
But yeah, people getting in trouble and fired for having sex at work, I think, is always got to be one of the most embarrassing things ever, right?
Right, because that's the story that lives on forever in the workplace, right? If you get fired for attendance, no one even remembers you a month later. But you get caught in the break room, right? Yeah. 5 years from now, people are like, oh, remember when they caught Scott in the break room?
Exactly. You might as well just learn a new language and move to another country, because I don't know how you escape that shit now with like social media and stuff.
Right.
I don't know how you do it.
And then you take that police officer in the small town, and she had to have moved away from that town in Tennessee, right? Because everywhere she goes, I'm sure people are looking at her. She might as well have a scarlet letter on her.
Absolutely.
Right? So.
And, she had a she wasn't like a 10 out of 10. Bo Derek, she was not. And she had a very specific look about her. She didn't have a plain face, like I think I might have. Or I might even be more on the ugly side. But I would blend in. She has a very unique look. And, cops everywhere saw that story.
Right.
She ain't walking over to the next town and getting a job, I don't think. Or maybe she will. Another person wrote, I was caught by my boss's boss going at it with my boss.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, isn't that like Michael Scott kind of stuff right there? He said he threw his binder down on the ground to get our attention. Then he left and we broke apart. Then just finished the shift. I was sure we were both going to get fired. I was nervous, wrecked the whole day. In the end, he decided not to tell anyone and not to fire us. He just asked me if it was consensual, which it was, and lectured me on how inappropriate that was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the coolest boss in the world. I don't think I've worked for anybody who'd look the other way there.
Through your research, and this just kind of dawned on me, or I could have maybe done the research myself, but you just wonder how many, like, I'm sure pilots and stewardesses and things like that, right? I'm sure there's because there's a power dynamic there,
Right.
You just kind of wonder, like, do they try to sneak off in the plane somewhere?
You know what? It's not the plane. I worked at a hotel. Remember, they get off the plane, they all get in the same car and go to a hotel.
Right.
Absolutely, that has to be where it happens.
Right.
Airplane be a little tough.
It would be, but I just think the thrill of it, right, probably
Right.
is like, oh, let's try it. But you're right, because there's never just an empty airplane.
Right. And I don't want my pilot putting on autopilot to join the Mile High Club. I'd be kind of pissed. Like,
Right.
come on, dude, really?
Right.
I watched
Right.
too many air disasters to see how that shit's going to end.
They probably have. Do they have cameras in the cockpits now since 9/11? Because I would
No
wonder
idea.
if maybe you had like two pilots that trying to hook up front, because there's a lot of female pilots now, right? Or maybe it's two guy pilots. Nothing,
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
Whatever.
But I just wonder if like you said, autopilot, and they little quick some little quick action here, real quick, and.
That's possible.
But again, if there's cameras there, which there might be nowadays with all the different safety things, but
Well, now that we're talking about in the sky, I don't know this for sure, but I have a recollection that NASA at one point took men and women up, outside of our atmosphere, right, in space, and let them have sex and wanted them to have sex, and it became an experiment because
sure, just
a lot of the reproductive system works really well here on Earth because of that little thing called gravity.
Right.
Like, without gravity, I think they were saying that it's possible that you're not going to be able to impregnate somebody because there has to be a certain amount of gravity to pull, eggs down and stuff. And it's kind of funny. Think about it. If you and your wife were astronauts and they were like, okay, we not only want you to go up and have sex, which you're like, all right, then we're going to study you.
Right.
That'd be a little awkward.
Right. Now you'll forget the cameras in the corner. Just get going at it. Don't worry. Don't think about the camera.
And if you want, we can give you tips. I mean, we're here for you if you need something. But that would be the most awkward thing in the world. Like, we're going to watch you and your wife hook up, or not watch, right? We're just going to, take you into a house like E.T., and when you land, and we're going to fucking look at every single thing that's going on with your bodies.
Right.
That'd be weird.
Yeah, and I would imagine maybe they're hooking up some electrodes.
Yeah, or worse, you end up getting like ill because you had sex, and maybe you're not supposed to have sex in outer space, and then you got to explain to people,
Right.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's space herpes. You
That's
can't
right.
Get it on
Yeah,
Earth.
sweetheart, it had to be from up, and we were in space.
So then you also wonder about these astronauts that are on the International Space Station, right? It's got to get lonely up there, and then every
Right.
now and then they'll cycle through some fresh blood, so to speak. So maybe there's
You just blew my mind,
some
dude.
excitement there.
We just had a corrections officer. Do you think in the space station they can say gay for the stay? I mean, it's a long time.
Right. I mean, you're up there 2-3 years sometimes.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think I'd be like, let's get my wife up here. We'll do those studies that you guys said. It's funny. Another person that I researched, because I always think it's funny not funny, but interesting when people get fired for doing stupid shit. And this person, we had Dave here who indicated how he was fired from the same person twice at his work. This person said, hey, we were in high school and we worked at a small pizza parlor. And we opened on a Sunday together. We had to be there at 9 a.m. for prep, and we opened at 11 a.m. Well, the owner showed up right at 11 and had to unlock the door to get in. He found us in the back. I had her bent over a prep table.
Oh, boy.
Apparently, time had gotten away from us, and we were both fired on the spot.
Yeah.
Embarrassing? Oh, my God.
Right. I'm impressed that they could go 2 hours.
Exactly. Well, in fairness, they didn't say 2 hours. You just said time got away from them.
Yeah, true. Well, you said, they got there at 9, but you're right. Maybe they
Yeah. And that was the example of the boss who is just not having it. Like, you're gone.
Right.
Just get the hell out.
Right.
Another example was funny. They said, not me, but 2 coworkers at a small family restaurant got caught having sex in the bathroom when the owner literally opened the door on them because they didn't lock it. The girl was bent over the sink, and they were watching themselves in the mirror.
Oh, wow.
The owner slammed the door shut, and when they came out a few minutes later, panicky and shamefaced, he yelled at them, if you're going to do that, you clock out first. So everyone just laughed, and he just let it go.
Okay, well,
that must have been during a pretty tough time to get workers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Good help is hard to find sometimes, so you got to turn the other cheek, I guess.
And this next example that I'm going to tell, it has to be very prevalent. And I say that because I'm not throwing shade at people that work in food. I've worked there. Chris has worked there. But we did just tell stories about maybe some people in the food management business who don't use the best judgment, for example, giving alcohol to minors. In this example, this person said, I used to work in fast food, and a manager got caught having sex with an employee. They were just going to transfer him, but then they realized the employee was 17.
Oh.
So he was fired, and the employee had actually quit because they thought it would keep the manager from being fired.
Oh, wow.
That's some sketchy area. The manager was 24. I think 17-year-olds kind of know what sex is, and they know what they're doing. But still, first off, your boss, you don't do that. But my God, when you were, I'm going to say this to Chris, and he was robbing the cradle when we were younger. But could you imagine the danger if you were over 18, just hooking up with somebody who was not 18, even though any other time of your life, 6 months going forward, it would be perfectly fine. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that this stuff happens in like the food service industry because those are entry-level jobs, lots of young people, and sometimes you have a lot of young people doing the management.
Right. And again, I think some of it is just that, that authority figure kind of gets to them sometimes, right? Like the younger person, if they're getting attention from that authority figure,
right?
They take it to heart sometimes, and they'll do stuff that they shouldn't do or wouldn't do with somebody their own age, maybe.
I actually had a scenario happen at one of the jobs that I worked. We had that happen, and apparently they broke it off, but this was long after we all found out that it went on. But the dude would also just be really creepy to the other girls on staff. It was very bizarre. Eventually, that did make it up to management, and he did get canned. But it was also more for the actions towards other people as well. So it happens a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's when you have the creepy manager that's not actually hooking up because he's so creepy, and the girls are just like, "Get away from me, dude!"
Yeah. Well, and these things usually surface because people start to feel like there's favoritism.
Right.
And then when you find out, oh, well, yeah, there certainly is, because you wouldn't believe what Becky does to him in the stockroom.
Right.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Right.
Speaking of sex for work, I've always wondered, when sex is your work, like, seriously, I have worked, with HR for a very long time, and I'm on board with 98% of the stuff that they say. But could you imagine if you ran like a sex shop?
Right.
Like what HR department? Like, you can't talk about sex? That's what you're selling.
Right.
Right. 14-inch dildos. How can you possibly not have that kind of environment?
Yeah, but they're not hiring underage people, so that part of it gets taken out of the equation. But yeah, I guess if you have, is it okay? 2 consensual people working there, they're around it all day.
Right.
You start to get a little worked up, and you just gotta take care of business, I guess.
That's the first thing. You certainly can't say a customer came in and was, sexually explicit with me.
Right.
It's like, yeah, because of course you were looking for something at the store. And I always wondered about this too. Not since, the days where all my friends were getting married when I was in my 20s, have I spent time in strip clubs. It always reminds me of going to a buffet where you can't eat. And that just seems like the most ridiculous thing. But, if you ran a strip club, how in the world do you talk to people? These are men or women getting naked for a living. I imagine if you're like, gee, Sally, seems like you put on a few pounds. You're just looking for problems, right?
Right.
Do you let the market hand that out and Sally just doesn't get enough tips and she goes away? Or do you have to go, hey, Sally, we have a treadmill in the back?
Well, let's be real. In our 20s, during all of our friends getting married, we went to quite a few bachelor parties. We would end up in these places. Nobody's telling Sally she's got a few pounds on her, because we saw Sally with a few pounds on her and she did just fine, right? I think there's somebody out there for everybody, I guess. That's what I'm saying. And the managers probably don't care. If it's still getting people in the door, who cares?
I think you're right to an extent, but some of the places we were going to, everyone looked like Sally. So it was a little different, those places.
I mean, yeah, we weren't going to Scores.
Exactly.
The airport, the strip club by the airport is probably not the best example.
You know how Cousin Eddie went to that, the casino that had all the weird games? That was the equivalent of our strip clubs.
Yeah, that's true. That was my first experience with a C-section scar.
Well, I mean, I absolutely very clearly remember going to a bachelor party, and I think you were there, but I'm not positive, but we went to a place that doesn't even exist anymore, and it was just a dive. I'm sure they closed it because of all the blood on the floor where people have been shot and killed. This place was just a dive, and I'll never forget. And it makes me wonder if this is one of those scenarios. They had a woman come out to strip. She had to be 8.5 months pregnant.
I was there. I remember.
And I was thinking to myself, like, oh my God, this poor woman. Like, I appreciate the effort. Don't get me wrong, but does she really want to be doing this?
Right.
And certainly, I don't know if the manager would have the balls to go, excuse me, Monica, but let's have a little conversation. You're about to break your water here. Could you not do it on our customers?
Right.
I mean, it was a very awkward thing.
Right.
But that's it. Luke, this is your job. You've got to go to one of the sex shops around here and get one of them to come and talk to us because I got questions.
Right.
And we need them answered.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a strip club. It could be
strip club,
like a Lion's Den type place.
Absolutely, any of those. I got questions.
All right, I can try.
All right, there is no try. There's only do. But I also wonder, since things have changed, we've got so much technology. I think that's part of the reason a lot of these strip clubs you don't see as many as you used to. Like, what if your job was OnlyFans?
Right.
Like, I listened to this podcast where there was somebody who used to be on it, and she had rather large breasts, but she always talked about them because they were so big, blah, 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 blah. And then she literally came out and said, her name's Gina Grad, by the way. She came out. She was on Adam Carolla's show. Very funny, very entertaining, very pretty. She came out one time and said, I just found out that there are people making $200,000 a month.
Whoa.
A month doing OnlyFans. Now, she had this giant, broad audience of Adam Carolla people who immediately were like, yep, I know how you can get at least one subscription. And I think she literally, she told on the show, she pondered doing it. The problem was she was in a relationship, and she was in a relationship with a man she ended up marrying who had a child. And I think what happened is she finally was just like, man, if I open up this door, those pictures last forever. Don't think that they go away.
Right.
And she finally said no to it. But I don't know, Chris, could you turn down $200,000 a month, even if it was just for a few months or a year?
I would probably do it for $200 a month.
Right. I mean, being able to buy a pizza is being able to buy a pizza.
Right.
Whatever.
That's right.
And I do think it's funny. Now, I don't know anything about OnlyFans other than what I've read about it. I'm too stingy and too old to, start subscribing to somebody. And talk about creepy. I'm in my 50s, for God's sakes.
Right.
So I was reading how there are some people on BuzzFeed, and they talk about how they are on OnlyFans, like they're performers, and they get noticed out in the wild.
Oh, yeah. See, that would, yeah. And I think, there's probably they think it's kind of an anonymous type thing, but then once you start getting recognized out in the real world, it might freak some of them out. Like, oh yeah, this is getting too close to home now.
Right. And one of the BuzzFeed stories I thought was just crazy, because this again gets back to maybe you're using some poor judgment. This person said, my wife knew a coworker who was fired for filming herself masturbating on a vacant hospital bed for her OnlyFans account. Someone saw her work badge and reported her.
Oh wow. So turn that around.
Yeah, I didn't think that one through. Not only that, but I don't know, maybe people are into the cosplay stuff, but I'd have been okay if you weren't on a patient bed. You know? Sure. I'd be okay not seeing that part of it.
Right.
Another person said recently, I had a new client who adamantly said she knew my voice. She keeps bringing it up every week, asking, have I done radio, podcast, or voiceover work? She jokes that she'll get to the bottom of my mystery somehow. And this guy says, I make erotic audio for women, and built up a pretty solid following during the lockdowns. And he checked the patrons group, and she was a subscriber to all the smut that he would talk through. And he goes, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to fall where she figures it out.
Yep.
Like, oh, that's who he is.
I wonder if she'll be embarrassed or excited to know that she, met this guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
embarrassed
I don't know.
because she's gonna be like, oh, now
It's
he knows
out what
I
I
listen to
like.
that kind of stuff. Right?
Exactly. But yeah, that kind of stuff is crazy. Not that I don't think there was ever a time in my entire history that anyone would pay 50 cents to see what I got under these clothes. But you know what I mean? The idea that people can do it, there's got to be a price, right?
Well, and let's just, you kind of said a little bit about it. We're older now, and that's not really our thing. Even though there are older people, I'm sure that are. But again, if this technology was around, say, when we were 20 coming up through, we had some lean years between you and, when we first met.
Yeah.
We might have been like, hey, man, I figured out a way we can make some money. All we got to do is start this OnlyFans page. I'm not saying we would do it together, creep, but we might have. I don't know. Who knows?
Don't judge me.
But you never know. We might have thought, oh, hey, that's easy money, without thinking it through because we were 20, 21 years old.
Right. Well, I think we got some questions that need to have answers to, because I am so intrigued now with like running, I don't know, a strip club or a sex shop.
Right. Maybe we should just throw it out to our listeners. If you guys know anybody that works in a sex club or a strip club, I should
Or
say
a
sex
stripper.
club. I meant like a sex shop. Stripper, an OnlyFans person. We would love to talk to them for 40, 45 minutes.
We definitely have some questions. Because I've grown up in, corporate world, and there is a very fine line. Like,
Right.
and you know me, you guys hear me all the time. I'm stupid. I say stupid shit all the time. I'm very sarcastic. Like, I'm considered the funny guy and the guy that's like, ooh, he walks up against the line. Trust me, I don't say shit at work that would get me in trouble.
Right.
And I'm considered like, ooh, the edgy guy.
Right.
I just couldn't imagine if you have something that is around sex at work. If I worked at a sex place, oh my God, I'd probably be scared to death to say anything to anybody.
Right.
The line's too drawn right there.
And then, it'd also be kind of interesting to talk to somebody. I'm sure that there's some people that have like an OnlyFans thing where their face isn't seen. People are into different stuff. Maybe it's like a
You
foot
seem
fetish
to know
thing.
a lot about this.
Well, I've done some research.
Okay.
Just don't look at my credit card statement. But I'm sure that there's some people that do that live like a normal corporate world
Oh, yeah.
type job, right? But what people don't know is then at night they're filming foot fetish videos for OnlyFans or something. That would be an interesting person
look,
to talk
I
to
mean,
also, right?
I don't have it like in front of me, so I can't give all the details about it. But I remember stories very clearly where there were people who were, say, teachers, like grade school teachers, and they had done porn. Not that they actively were doing porn, but
Right.
they had done porn
In their past.
And I'm not talking past 20 years, but 5 years prior, because they're a young teacher. They're probably under the age of 30. And as soon as some parents found out that they had done porn, people lost their minds and
Right.
went to get them fired, which I guess I don't even understand that portion. Like, okay, you made some questionable decisions, or you're 100% fine with what you did, and you're fine with it. You don't tell all the second graders, but you're okay with it. I don't get, like, would you be upset if you found out that one of your kids, the third grade teachers was doing porn?
I don't think so. It's like you kind of alluded to. As long as she's not like telling the third graders about it, or like, hey, here's a great option for you to make some money to get through college. I wouldn't want that. But
College don't pay for itself.
right. But we've all done. Everybody's got skeletons, right? So I don't know that should follow you around again, unless you're flaunting it or throwing it out there. Student teacher conferences, you're telling
Right.
the parents, hey, check out my videos. That's crossing the line, of course, but something somebody did, and 5 years later they don't do that anymore.
Right. In
But-
fact, I'd pass more judgment on the person that was like, hey, you look familiar. Well, how the hell do you know?
Right. But again, you said it, right? Once it's on the internet, it's always on the internet. So 30, 40 years ago, people could get away with some of that stuff a little bit more because their past could stay their past. Nowadays, and this is off topic, of course, but you kind of wonder how some politicians are ever going to be politicians in 30 years because pictures, everyone's got a cell phone, everyone's got a camera. These pictures are out there forever.
I think you're looking at this the wrong way, Ben. I think anyone will be able to be a politician because it'll be so accepted.
Yeah, that's true.
It's going to be like, well, of course. I mean, think about it from this perspective. This is the same dichotomy that happened with like Ring doorbells, right? You thought, Ring doorbells and car alarms, right? Back in the 80s, if you had a car alarm, number one, you were the shit because you had a car that was nice enough to have an alarm.
Right.
And number two, when that alarm went off, every freaking head was like, what's going on?
Right.
Now, when's the last time you ever stopped to look for a car alarm going off?
Right.
And with Ring doorbell, you thought, crime is done because anybody who comes on my porch, they're definitely going to get busted by the cops. There's probably 300 million Ring doorbells out there. And all I see is more people being porch pirates, stealing shit. And I don't see the cops, putting up gigantic drag nets to catch these people.
Right.
In fact, they go, well, you got to be careful.
Right. So then we'll bring it full circle here. I'll be surprised if more people don't get caught having sex at work because camera technology is so cheap.
Yeah.
I'm sure these managers, small business owners have cameras set up more because they're trying to keep theft away, right, from employees stealing from them, only to find out like, oh, look, they're hooking up in the storeroom.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's got to be all the places where customers have to go to. But honestly, think about it. From all the office workers that used to work at the office that now work at home, what percentage of the time do you think they're on the clock hooking up with their boyfriend, girlfriend?
Right.
I mean, it's got to be there.
Sure.
That's got to be one of those, this is going to make my work day a lot better if I'm getting paid for doing this.
Right.
It's got to happen.
Yeah. But, hey, don't worry. They're on their 15-minute break, so it's okay.
15 minutes? They're going to do it 4 times?
Well, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think this is the time of the episode where I ask you, Chris, what'd you learn today?
I learned that it's not impossible to maybe see an 8.5-month pregnant person when you're out at a bachelor party.
Not only not impossible, very probable, depending on where you like to hang out. Let me know where you want to go. I learned that Chris has a price to do OnlyFans, so I'll be pimping him out as soon as I get a chance. I'll let you guys know exactly where to go find him.
Yeah, we'll put the link in our Twitter bio.
And I hope you like feet. That's all I have to say. All right. Well, this is Scott McLaughlin.
I'm Chris Kiernan
saying we'll see you at work.
Thank you for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more crazy stories, make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on our social media, including Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Rumble, Instagram, and YouTube.